India unleashes potential in the global natural resources space, what's holding back investment in the sector, and what can be done from a policy perspective to try and unleash the potential? Joining us on this special presentation here for the Global Natural Resources Conclave is our special lineup of panelists to discuss that and chart out an agenda for the future. Joining me this evening on the show, we've got Shashi Mukundan of BP. Thanks very much for joining us. Also with us, Joe Phelan, Director at WBSCD India. And on my right, we've got Sudhir Mathur, the CEO of Kane India. Also with us, Mr. Pradipta Ghosh, the Distinguished Fellow at Terry, and Peter Nichols, Fellow, Perth US Asia Centre, looks at the mining sector. Gentlemen, appreciate you joining us here on the show.
Thank you.
Let me start by asking you, Mr. Mukundan, we've been talking about the potential and the promise of India's oil and gas space, India's natural resources space for many, many years. But if you look at the data, and I'm only going to throw up some examples now, and this is a study done by EY, which says that India has explored only 7 to 9% of mineral resources in comparison to the 100% geophysical and geochemical surveys in countries like Australia. The Indian mining sector grew at a CAGR of 7.3% in the last decade, compared that to 22% in China. This is just one statistic. What's holding us back?
I think, Shireen, it's not one thing that's holding us back. I think it's a series of things, right? Because India has, just been at the place where, we've started to look at oil and gas at a scale. And there have been a whole host of issues which needed to be dealt with. But what you're seeing now is, we're in a place where we're starting to unleash that, and we're starting to see more activity happening.
What's changed?
What's changed is, we've got a clear direction now in terms of where the country is going, right? If you sit back and look at it, the Prime Minister's come out and said he wants to see a 10% reduction in imports. That's giving the impetus to open up the policies. We're seeing more, investor-friendly policies coming out, whether it's, the new exploration policies that are coming out, the new freedom for marketing and pricing of gas, and you're seeing more and more activity happening in this space. Of course, this is a long gestation project, so which means it'll take a little bit of time.
Yeah.
I think what you will see is in the next 3 to 5 years, you will start seeing an increase in activity.
Okay. BP is one of the largest FDI investors into India. Policy unpredictability or policy uncertainty was one of the key reasons why foreign investors were choosing not to invest in the natural resources space in India. Do you believe that has changed significantly now from a business confidence perspective? Yes,
it has. And what I would say is that what's important for us as we look forward is that we need to make sure there is stability in terms of both fiscal and contractual terms. And that becomes very critical. And as long as we get that, because again, these are 10-year, 20-year projects. So you don't want these things to change. So once you do that, then you can see more activity happening. Because every 1% increase in production, out of our fields could give you almost 450 million barrels of additional reserves. I mean, that's almost 7% increase in reserves. Similarly, how do you create more, everybody keeps talking about gas, and we're looking to increase gas utilization from 6.5% to 15%.
Yeah.
How do we bring that? One of the things you could do is start thinking about demand hubs for gas. Where you anchor it around, a key customer, a key source of supply. Build along with it, CGD. You can build along with it, your pipeline gas. Bring in customers so that you bring in more certainty for the customers in that area, and then you start building that. And if you start building those hubs, and the government's already started that with Dhamra, for example, right? And you link it into the smart cities.
Well, that's a great start to the conversation, because you've put some 3 specific ideas on the table that the government ought to look at and take forward. Sudhir Mathur, let me come to you now. And Shashi Mukundan here today, feeling much more confident about the policy environment. I don't know if you share that confidence or that optimism, specifically when it comes to tax, for instance.
No, I think I do share Sashi's view. I think, starting with the resources sector, if you look at what you see in India, is very well endowed with resources. That's what our belief has been in Vedanta. If you look at, we have the necessary talent.
Yeah.
We have the consumers, right? And of late, the political will has been quite explicit in what they want in setting a pace and direction.
How significant is the fact that there is now perhaps more political will, more political capital and more political appetite to take this agenda forward? I mean, we've all seen what's happened with mining in this country. Do you believe that a large part of the growth is now going to be linked to the fact that there seems to be now more political appetite?
Oh, absolutely. We have complete confidence. We've seen a lot of political will and, of late, both at the ministerial level as well as the PM's office, in setting direction both on the entire energy agenda, the resources agenda, and specifically even contractually. I'm sure, we will see these changes.
Royalty?
I guess you're referring to our PSC extension. But, if you look at it, we've been in this business for 22 years, right? And we certainly are deliberating interpretation of a clause. The matter is sub judice. But all I can say is one deliberation in 22 years tells you we are not a banana republic, right? And if you look at the last 2-3 years, a complete, political will to make it happen. We understand that it will take time. It takes time for a new government to come in, settle down, look at the history behind it. But surely a very clear path ahead.
Let's talk about what you left, at the end of your comment, which is what do you need to do to make this happen? At least business feeling a lot more confident about the potential of the sector today. We've seen certain legislative changes being brought about addressing these issues in these sectors. Mr. Ghosh, if I could ask you now, what would be the imperatives to really make this sector not just deliver on its promise and potential, but deliver for India's economic value?
Well, let me address my remarks not just to the oil and gas sector, but to the natural resources sector more generally. There were 3 generic types of issues, quite apart from issues like, technology and and infrastructure and so on. And the first of these is transparency in allocation of natural resources.
Yes.
This has been sorted out in the last few years.
Yes.
Through some interventions by the Supreme Court, through policy measures. So now we have a system of open auctions. So
the discretion has been done away with?
The discretion has been done away with, but there are second order issues with so there are issues like optimal auction design to make sure that it's fair to both sides and that the possibilities of collusion etc. are minimized. The second, and this has bedeviled a lot of mining projects, for example.
Yes.
And that is that we need a social contract with the local communities so that there is a fair sharing of resources from the local communities to the states to the center.
But hasn't that now been put in place by way of the Mineral Development Fund, for instance?
Well, I'm not sure that the entire political dialogue that needs to take place has happened.
Okay.
And the third is that we need to understand that there are not imaginary but real conflicts between natural resources extraction and natural resources which are life support systems. And these are, for example, forests, which provide the water in our rivers, which conserve the soil and so on. So once again, I think there has not been a serious political conversation around this aspect too. So I think that the glass is half full, but we need that now that we have political will, the political will needs to exert itself further and to address these long-standing issues.
On that note, we are going to take a break. When we return, we continue our conversation on what it will take to open up India's natural resources segment. Welcome back. You're watching this Network 18 presentation. We're discussing what it will take to try and unleash the potential and the promise of India's global natural resources segment. So, Joe Phelan, while we unleash the promise and potential of the sector, it has to be done in a way that's sustainable.
Yeah, thank you. So absolutely, we have to unleash the potential of this sector for India's growth. It's essential for sustained economic development.
Yes. And to actually get people to buy into the idea of opening the sector up further.
That's right. So Dr. Ghosh mentioned the social contract, which is essential. But alongside that, there are also severe environmental limitations to growth unless we deal with them and approach them in the right way. And I think that there's a huge opportunity with this government and with industry at the moment to forge partnerships in providing solutions to meet these challenges. So we know that air quality is a big issue for people in this country, and again, if we look at the natural resources sector in the round, then water availability is an enormous issue for the people of India and for industry. There are manufacturing plants right now in India that are shut down because they don't have enough water, so it's a real limiter to growth. Sustainability is a core business issue. It's a societal issue, it's a societal imperative, but it's essential for business that these problems are solved. They'll only be solved with business working with experts and with government and with society together. So I think we need to look at the fundamentals of rights and access and transparency in revenues, but we also need to look at how energy and minerals are consumed and the whole energy and mineral system. Oil and gas will be part of India's energy mix for some time, but let's also be making the investments and the informed decisions about what India's mobility system is going to be, and your remarks about this link into smart cities, the potential of gas with ports and forward and backward integration with sea freight and service freight are absolutely essential. So we've got to be very structured and plan very well now to have lasting growth.
Peter, let me put that point to you and take the conversation forward. The need for this integrated energy policy, so to speak, which not only looks at where India stands today, but looks at what India should aspire to be, 20, 30 years down the line. I mean, we need to worry about our energy security. We need to worry about the environment. We need to think about mobility differently. In that context, how would you connect the dots? Because we do have a tendency, unfortunately, in this country to operate in silos.
Sure. So I think there's two elements that are quite exciting in India in terms of natural resources. One is an unlocking of natural resources. One is given India's economic trajectory, it's right at the cusp of accelerating its consumption of commodities and energy, and that's very exciting from an industry perspective. And given that cusp, India is either going to make in India and earn from that, or it will invariably make other nations fairly wealthy through high commodity prices. So I guess that's one part, and then the other key interesting thing is the government's reform agenda and its clear political intent to do things differently. I think there's a bit of a catch-22 in that it's prepared to make changes and to make improvements, and whilst ever you're making changes, it's the opposite to creating a stable, consistent environment. But that's something you have to go through for change. So to link back to your question, how do you link all the dots together? I think you've got to do the tough reforms up front, which transparency and the reform policies the government have engaged on are a good start. So I think the incentivising exploration is a very critical thing. It's the return on investment in exploration is very low. So encouraging private sector to unlock your own resources is a very good thing to do.
Okay, let me take that point forward. How do you incentivize more spending on exploration in India? And again, I'm looking at the numbers. India is spending on exploration projects at 0.3% of global spend compared to 19% for Canada, 12% for Australia. What needs to be done?
I think on the exploration side, what's been important was to have clarity in terms of where you're going to take it once you explore and find. We went through a period where it was difficult to see that through. But now that you've got a thing where you're starting to see the demand growing, you're starting to build the demand centers, you're starting to see, freedom in terms of, pricing and marketing, right? I mean, you can market around. It gives you more ability to take that risk. Because, again, you're trying to compare, it's not just India risk, it's also India risk vis-a-vis other countries. So if I'm trying to look at a global portfolio, how do I attract more? This is where I talked about, we could probably do is, you need to kind of kickstart it one of the ways to do that is to say, okay, I'm going to take large chunks of land or water or whatever it is, and say, okay, I'm going to carve that out and give it to people who can, who have the technology and who you believe will really take a real shot at it. And once you bring those, and then you bring along with that your Indian companies. So you bring a PSU or an Indian private company as a partner. Once you do that, what's happening is you're also building capability within the country.
Without reinventing the wheel, I mean, we've just talked about what other countries are doing and how they've been able to attract investment and how they've been able to grow in this space. What is it that we can perhaps, pick up from global examples and import, so to speak?
Sure. So the reform agenda the Indian government has embarked on with auctions and transparency is actually pretty unique in the world. So it's almost creating its own regime. And so if it is successful, it'll actually be a lesson for many other countries to focus on. Now, given the size of India and given its consumption trajectory, if the government delivers, it will be a lesson for every other country. So it's very much embarked on a slightly different approach, certainly in the mining sector.
Okay, so a unique approach certainly in the mining sector. That's the view that Pete has put on the table. But Mr. Ghosh, your number one concern at this point in time, and as we talk about the opportunities, again, I want to get specifics, because at the end of the day we would like to draw out an action agenda for government and for industry to work together to try and really get things started for this sector. What would those be?
Well, the process and policies for allocation of large acreages, to my mind, it's a very difficult policy and regulatory issue. And considering in particular the hyper focus on accountability in our Indian political system. And there are, of course, examples in other democracies, Canada, Australia, maybe the United States. But I'm not sure how much of that experience is actually, can actually be, transplanted to India. So
especially given the huge trust deficit here.
Yeah, and the point, of course, is it's a problem that's well known to economists. Okay. But it's not easy to get a solution. So I hope that we are able to, ultimately put together our policy framework without making too many mistakes. But one significant mistake in developing this policy and regulatory regime, and it will all blow up in smoke. So that's what I'm afraid of. I see a serious risk in policy and regulatory mistakes going forward, because we just do not have comparable experience in the world.
Okay. Yeah.
Sorry. I think also what one should be careful. It's very easy for a natural resources company to have good community relations when all you're dealing with is outback Australia or the Arctic Canada, where there's not a lot of people. The unique thing about India is
that's a lot of people.
There's a lot of people. And so the challenges for resource companies here is significantly more than you see in Australia and Canada and elsewhere in the world, and we shouldn't underestimate that.
No, we shouldn't. And would you say, Joe, that is the key challenge and the key risk?
More broadly at a societal level, I think it's essential that with the development of natural resources, it's as part of a plan for transformation of a number of systems for India, and that includes actually the material system, and we need to build circularity into the material system so that when we excavate natural resources, we're not creating value from them one time but many times over. And there's a real opportunity. There's no legal framework at the moment to support that, so there's a real opportunity with the government to partner again with industry to create that legal framework so that industry can invest in creating industrial clusters with waste collection, sorting and repurposing, and that's really essential so that we really capture the value from the natural resource exploration and excavation that lies ahead for India.
I'm going to end with Sudhir and Shashi. Put your money where your mouth is. If you're feeling good about India, what can we expect in terms of investments over the next few years?
So, as you know, we have about close to 4 trillion cubic feet of discovered resources sitting in our various blocks at various stages of development and appraisal. We are in the process of, working these through. Some of them are in the engineering stage, some of them are in the appraisal stage, some of them are actually in the bid stage. And what you will see from us is over the next 4 to 5 years, you will see us making some major bets in India, investing and
A number?
getting more.
A number?
No. I can't give you a number because we're in the midst of bids.
Are you going to cop out on the number as well, or are you going to give me a number?
I think we've made our plans quite clear, and we've been very eager to invest. Let me start by exploration. We've just started exploration in an absolutely new block. So that tells you our confidence in investing in India. In Rajasthan, we made our plans reasonably clear to say that we would be we are looking forward to doubling the production in the next 3 years. And this would mean an investment of at least $3 billion.
Okay. Well, that's a good note to end this conversation on as we discuss the roadmap to unleash the potential and the promise of India's natural resources segment. There's plenty of challenges. It's not going to be easy. It's complex. It's complicated. It involves the state. It involves the center. It involves the environment, and it involves social contracts as well. So those are going to be some of the challenges that policymakers and industry need to work on together. But we will be addressing those concerns and the opportunities right here on Network 18 through the course of this special series. But for now, from all of us here, goodbye. Many thanks for watching.